Y'all know what it is.
Hey there, and welcome back to Eggs. This week we have special guest, founder and CEO of Mindful Money, Jonathon DeYoe. Jonathon has an interesting story to tell. Emerging from Rapid City, South Dakota, and being raised in a family that was less than financially secure, he developed an interest in financial education early. In fact, he began making stock trades at just 9 years old with the money he'd made mowing yards and doing odd jobs. After leaving college, he worked for several years in large, San Francisco-based Wall Street financial firms like Morgan Stanley and PaineWebber. But after what could only be described as a negative experience in many of these firms, Jonathon decided to make a change and go solo. He launched his firm in 2001 with a focus on independent financial advice and unparalleled client service. Joining us today to discuss getting started with financial planning, please join us in welcoming to the show our guest, Jonathon DeYoe. Hey, Jonathon, how are you? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Mike and Ryan.
Of course, good to have you. So a little bit of context. We had some technical difficulties today, and Mike and I could hear Mike and Jonathon having just kind of a conversation prior to the show, and it was amazing. So for everybody who missed that conversation, I really apologize because it was amazing. So, but hopefully this one we can live up to the hype that's sort of been preset. So I guess, Jonathon, why don't we just kind of start at the beginning? Do you mind giving us a little bit of background on who you are, where you're from, and what you do?
You bet. I mean, I've never heard that little audio intro in the same way. So yeah, I'm from Rapid City, South Dakota. I didn't grow up with a lot of money, grew up sort of coveting a lot of folks' nice cars, nice vacations. We went to the lake, we went camping, they went, got on airplanes and went places. I wanted those sorts of things. So I studied undergrad, I studied finance, got bored out of my mind very quickly and started to consider things like, English lit. That didn't really work for me. So I started studying philosophy and comparative religion, graduated with a degree in exactly that, philosophy, comparative religion, and then went on to grad school and came out to California, to Berkeley, to the Graduate Theological Union as a seminarian. The intention was to be a Lutheran minister. Then I went, okay, I don't want to be a minister. I want to study this stuff academically. So I switched to Buddhist phenomenology, and I studied Tibetan Buddhism pretty seriously for 3 years. My wife said at the time, my first wife said, all right, it's my turn to go to school. You go to work and support me. So I dropped out, no degree in Buddhist studies, 3 years of graduate program, needed a job, no job for that particular skill set. So went to Wall Street and they hire anybody. So that's where I started working there.
I guess I need to go to Wall Street.
You're getting in the wrong spot, Mike. You've been over on, Broadway.
So did 5 years there, as you guys mentioned in that intro. I've been investing for a long time. I've been curious for a long time. And then when I launched my own company, I decided that financial literacy and financial planning were sort of the hallmarks or the foundations of what I wanted to do for clients, for people.
Cool. No, I think it's really interesting, your story. And I wanted to ask you just sort of what do you think is the role that I guess like a traditional education played in your career, right? I mean, you say that Wall Street hires anybody, and maybe that is in fact true. I don't know. But I mean, but there's such a split between the, financial training or sort of what you would consider a traditional education in finance, and then making this jump into, religious studies and then ultimately into Buddhist studies. It's, maybe two paths that you don't see walking together all that often. The humble Buddha walking down the dirt path in his flip flops, and your financial Wolf of Wall Street type.
So two things. One, you can be religious or spiritual and not be a monk. And two, you can work on Wall Street and not be the Wolf of Wall Street. So there's definitely middle ground between those two areas.
Both my stereotypes.
Right. Definitely middle ground. I think that the education didn't lead me to finance. Like I grew up wanting to understand finance, and when I was 8, 9, 10 years old, I was studying business, and I ran little businesses. Like you did the lawn mowing, at 7, I was doing gum sales. Like, I don't know if anyone does that, but yeah, I absolutely sold, a piece of gum for $0.25, and then took that quarter and bought 5 pieces of gum. So that's like a pretty good markup on a single product at school. That worked. So I've been doing that all my life, and I've been very interested in money because I didn't have any. Now that I have it, and I was talking earlier, I'm questioning the striving for it. So some of that Buddhism keeps coming back, and some of that what's it all mean? What's important? And that's really what the whole middle section of the book is about, is figuring out what's really important.
So you just mentioned the book. It's called Mindful Money. Can you tell us a little bit about it? You were saying there's 3 different sections. Why did you write the book? And just break it down for us.
So 2007, 2008, the world is falling apart. Great recession. Real estate all over the planet is cratering. It's affecting markets. So we had 2.5 years of like hell, the worst time in my career, the most difficult time in my career ever. And I sat down with a client, and that client is a Pulitzer Prize winning author. And she said, we talked for like 2 hours, and she was telling me, I don't want to put money in the market. And I was like, I understand the fear. Like, I get it. And I can't make any promises. I don't know how this resolves itself, but I do know that it resolves itself, because, we've gone through crappy times, many, 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 many different kinds of crappy times over the years. And every single one of them, eventually, in the fullness of time, unpredictably, we don't understand the sources going in, resolves itself. And so she said, Jonathan, you got to take this and the rest of the conversation and all the conversations we've had, and you got to write a book so that more people have this kind of message, the message of patience and humility, rather than prediction and trying to figure out what happens next and trying to guess markets. Because you can't. No one can successfully predict or control the market. So there's a better way to engage it. And so that's where the book comes from, that conversation. And as you said, the book itself has 3 parts. The first part is really debunking a lot of the myths. We call them illusions in the book, the stuff that we've heard about finance and markets and investing that's just not the case.
Can you give us a couple of examples of those myths?
Well, the biggest one is that risk equals volatility. So many times market, and we have a very recent example, right? March of 2020, we have a pandemic. No one knows how that's going to work its way through the economy. Many people sold, and I think I saw a Fidelity study that 30% of people 65 and older sold all their investments and went to cash. This is March of 2020, which is the biggest mistake you can make, right? But it's an emotional response to an unknown outcome. So that's believing that the fact that it goes down is risk. The risk is actually the human response to very natural, very normal, run-of-the-mill volatility. And understanding the difference between volatility and risk is, I think, a very, very, very big, important thing that most of us just miss. We think market goes down, scary, bad, run. And that causes more problems than anything. So that's I think the best example of one of the myths that we hear about.
Well, and I think that's so true, right? I mean, all you hear your whole life is buy low, sell high, right? So if it's going low, I mean, by God, you got to get out.
Yeah, you got to run.
Yeah, and it's funny too, because that you say that the studies were sort of supporting the older folks were pulling their money out, because I mean, I know several older folks in my periphery that did exactly that. Yanked all their money out. And I've been asking recently for some, investment advice. Where should I put some money? That kind of stuff. And all of them are like, oh, well, we're just holding everything, holding cash, and I heard a thing one time, and maybe you can back this up with some actual numbers, because I'm not the finance guy, but I did hear something like, if you were to miss the prime 10 days in the last 20 years of investing, like your compound interest stuff and all the huge gains that you could have made, are basically cut in half or something. But over 10 years, it's like 10 days that make the difference.
Yep. So that study and that research is designed to teach us how to stay in our seats, teach us how to not sell, just because it's always the time when it feels the worst that you get the biggest returns. It's always the time when, and I think it's Buffett that said, you buy when there's blood in the streets. You buy when everyone else is selling. You sell when everyone else is buying. So it never feels like you're doing the right thing. It always feels like you're swimming against the herd, which, that makes sense. Look at the number of people that have wealth, the number of people that don't. It's very few people that end up with, massive piles of wealth that they can then do what they want with and create that freedom that they want. And that's partially because of character. I don't want to get into, too much of the political stuff that underlies a lot of this, because there's a lot of that too. But there is an emotional thing that you've got to understand about money, and getting there, it's not natural. It's not normal.
Yeah. So that's the first section of the book. What's the middle and end?
Middle section of the book is really talking about what really does matter. If the goal isn't more money, if the goal is happiness or well-being or a meaningful life, then, and I think that honestly, that should be the goal. I don't think more money should be the goal. But if the goal is well-being, then what are the things we focus on? And there have been monks, priesthood, psychologists have been studying this psychologists haven't studied this for thousands of years, but monks have been studying this for thousands of years. And psychologists have been confirming this in the last 50 years, that there's a very short list of things that we know leads to happier lives. Number one on the list, health. Number two is probably relationships, close family, things like meaningful work, things like gratitude, optimism, generosity, things like an accountability for one's own life, knowing what you want, going after what you want. These things, if you pursue these things, not piles of money, these things lead to a more meaningful life. And so the middle section of the book is designed to sort of help people understand. We call them 8 pillars of happiness. There could be 9, there could be 7. There's other ones that, I didn't include everything, but I think they all flow into each other and they form what we will call the foundation of a life well lived.
In the work you're doing, have you noticed a generational shift towards people believing this kind of thing, this idea about, sort of the value of personal happiness over the value of wealth? It seems somewhat generational that, like, at least in my view, that, older folks, there was maybe even just a generation or two ago, maybe you get further back and it's not this way, but, maybe my parents' generation, there was more focus on, get that money, start to build this, big nest egg and all this kind of stuff. And it became the generation of people who were putting in 60 hours a week and all this kind of stuff. Right. Where now it seems like with sort of the younger kids, maybe we're talking 25 and younger, these kids are starting to think kind of the opposite, that it's all about quality of life, and they'll go stay in the hostel, for $5 a day if they can be in Paris or whatever it is. Like, it's not as much about getting into the Four Seasons as it is about going out and having the experience.
Yeah, I totally see that. I don't know if it's, there once was a lot of people working hard and now there's a lot of people that want to have better lives. I don't know that it's a straight line in that direction. I think it's probably a pendulum that shifts, and it has a lot to do with, one generation has a certain set of opinions. That set of opinions, partially is adopted, partially is pushed back against in the next generation. The next generation comes, pushes back a little further, 2-3 generations hence, you're kind of on the other end of the pendulum. But then I think probably it swings back, because I think that there are some behaviors that the greatest generation or the boomer generation that get up early in the morning, work 12-hour days, come home late at night, have dinner with the family, go to bed, do it again the next day. I think there's some lessons in that I think the younger generations need to learn. And there's probably some lessons that the older generations could learn from the younger generations. And I do see the shift. I don't know. I think it's a pendulum that swings back and forth.
That makes sense to me. And I wonder too, if it isn't a little bit to do with age and sort of evolution too. Like, I mean, I know I'm only 42, but in my younger years, especially, maybe, I don't know, 18 to 35, I was just, I work in the advertising industry. And so the whole thing was badge of honor if you're the guy that worked 20 hours, last night, or if you worked overnight to get the job done, or, you worked over the weekend, these are the guys that get the kudos. And so I spent a lot of time doing that. And sort of like what you're saying, the idea of health being maybe number one, paramount importance, this idea of relationships, things like that. All those things have become more important to me as I've aged. And so I wonder if part of it even is just the experience of aging.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, your story resonates entirely. I'm almost 50, and I know that between the ages of 23 and probably 40, maybe 35, I was championing this idea that I get up at 4:30, I do my workout, I go to work, I work 12, 14 hours, I come back at night, and I sleep 3-4 hours a night, but I would work 14 hours a day. Like I was a huge champion of that. I did that. And to some extent, I did it maybe even a year ago. Like there's still vestiges of that are hanging on, even though I've built something, even though I have some success and I have some money in the bank and I've got some investments. Talking a little bit earlier, before we started recording, my brother died less than 2 months ago. And that really causes pause. That really makes you go, hey, what did my question, this is actually what I'm talking about or thinking about a lot these days is what is it that he did right, looking at his life, that I screwed up? What is it that I can adopt and take out of this that might benefit his family and my family in a way that it wouldn't have before? And it's not work so hard. The number one thing that I'm learning and I'm remembering is maybe not work so many hours, maybe spend more time with family.
Yeah. I live this principle. I mean, I'm a nomad. I'm on the road all the time, and I'm continually broke just because I live this principle. I chase the passion rather than the money. And I'm assuming that the last section of your book is how to do both and still get the money. Can you maybe break this down for someone like me who really needs this?
Well, yeah, I don't. So the reality is, personal finance is more personal than it is financial.
Yeah.
You have to have enough, right? But your definition of enough is going to be way different than my definition or anyone else's definition of enough. So we do make choices. Those choices do lead to outcomes. And so the question is, what do you want the outcomes to be? And this is when I'm talking to clients, what we're doing is we're trying to figure out and plan for what the outcomes they want to have happen are. And once we think about that and we really go deep, what's important to you? What do you want to accomplish in your life? Where do you want to end up? What kind of schools you want to support for your kids? What do you want your retirement to look like? Once we look at all these things, we know what they have to set aside. I mean, the rest is really simple. And so there's a period in all of our lives where we're, like you said, the nomads, where we're following the passion. And I've got a 16-year-old. My 16-year-old son he's a musician. By the way, he just dropped his first single on his second album on Spotify.
Oh, nice.
So he's 16. He has a whole album that he wrote, recorded, he did himself during quarantine, which blows my mind. But that's his passion. And he's 16. I'm thinking college. And he's like, well, I'm going to be a musician. I'm like, well, that's great. But college,
I had a very similar conversation with my parents when I was that age.
How'd it go? I mean, that's
I won and they're laughing now. So it's
No, what you did though, Mike, that I think blends these two things is you went to school for audio engineering. You sort of blended the passions, right?
Yeah.
So you went to school, you found a vocation that you could actually parlay into income, for example. Even though the lion's share of yours comes from still chasing down the passion, doing the DJ work and all that kind of stuff, and performing as a musician. But you did do some school stuff. So, don't discount, the fact you did get some education. You did do some things like that also that, maybe you can, I don't know, halfway tell your parents. So
yeah, that's true.
And that's the guidance. That's what I'm telling Eli, my son, is I'm saying, you know what, go to school, study music theory, study music production, so that say you're not the next whatever musical star, Justin Bieber, say you're not the next Bieber, what do you do instead? And hopefully he's 16, he doesn't really listen to me. Hopefully he gets that message from other people as well. And he does something with that. That's the hope.
Yeah.
But that's to your question, you make choices to lead you where you want to go. And you can be really, really happy and not have financial resources. And that's the lesson. I think the most important lesson is your well-being and your happiness do not depend on financial resources. I know I've got clients who don't have a lot of money, who have a very modest house, and they live close to a library, and they're voracious readers. That's all they need. They live in the Bay Area, expensive house, but they've lived here a long time, wasn't expensive when they bought it, and they have what they need. They don't have a lot, but they have what they need, and that's the really thing you got to do is figure out what you need and make sure you have that. And that's all you need. That's sort of definitional. It's a circular argument almost.
Yeah. Do you have any advice on finding that? So for example, a big part of what you're implying, and maybe this comes from your Buddhist teaching, and maybe this is why it feels kind of natural to talk about it. But I think for a lot of people, they don't know what they want. They're busy, learning what they want from whatever's happening on Instagram or from what so-and-so down the block is doing with their new car and their fancy house or whatever. And so busy, so people get so wrapped up in all that stuff, especially young people, but I see it in people my age too. And, they're chasing this vision of what they think they want, right? It's that grass is always greener thing. And instead, they don't really uncover what it is they actually need. They're busy living somebody else's dream. And so I wonder if you just had, from the, I don't know if it's a theological side or what it is, but I wonder if you have any take on that. Like, how do people drill down to what it is they actually want?
Yeah, that's always that's the biggest question. That's the most important part of financial planning, and it's probably the one that most people struggle with the most. And it doesn't help that we can buy something and have it shipped to us within the hour from Amazon. It doesn't help that we go on Facebook and see everyone, all these great lives and everyone doing all this great stuff, and we don't realize that everyone's posing. Everyone is, I don't post the picture of my son and I in a fight. I post the picture of my son just recording an album, right? So it looks like everyone's having a much better time than we are, and that's something that it's tough to get past. But, and I don't know if this was a plant or not, but I appreciate the question, because we actually have a free course that actually goes down through and helps people. It's a module. It's something that I've been doing for many, many years, and we basically call it your vision questing. It's you discovering your values, figuring out what your purpose is, creating a vision of your life that includes all those questions, and setting goals from that vision, 10-year, 5-year, 3-year, 2-year goals. And that free course is, it's available to anybody. And I'll make sure you guys have a link to it so that we can put it out in show notes as well.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, no, I think, an exercise like that, I think it's the one thing most people are missing, right? We don't honestly stop and take the time to evaluate our own needs very often. It's really easy to digest our needs based on what our neighbor has or whatever. We can see this thing and think, oh, well, that's cool, I must want that. Yeah. But it is difficult. Most people don't take the time to actually, think about it.
Right. Introspection is not something we're good at. That's, one of the, I don't know if this is a difference between like religious systems, but, in Buddhism, you spend a lot of time just sitting. In Lutheran church, when I was growing up, you spend a lot of time repeating a catechism and singing songs, which, there's nothing wrong with that, but it is not introspection. It is, here's some guidance, here's some stuff, you're listening to other people, and so introspection is not something we practice at all. And not being introspective means you've never really delved and spent quiet time. And I know that, if you have a cell phone with your bips and bleeps all the time, you're always checking in on what's happening. You don't set it to the side, ignore it, and sit quietly for an hour. But there's a huge advantage to spending an hour a day or half hour a day just sitting quietly, thinking about what you want.
That was one of my questions that I had for you on your one sheet that gets sent to us. You broke down that you're a 25-year meditation practitioner. So you've spent 25 years meditating every day. And as someone who, I've tried meditating, but I always think I'm doing it wrong. I don't know, like I just sit there, and after about 5 minutes, I'm bored. And then I kind of get up and go do my thing. Can you maybe break down what meditation is, and then how to actually, is there a proper technique to do it? And I'm sure that a lot of this mindfulness and meditation is part of your theory behind money. So maybe kind of put that spin on it, if you could.
So I'll first, just a quick correction. 25-year meditator does not mean every day 25 years. I would like it to mean every day for 25 years, but the first, say, 5 or 10 years, it's called that 25 years of attempted meditation. first 5 or 10 years, I was learning how.
Yeah.
And it takes a long time to create a practice out of meditation because of precisely what you talk about. Boredom happens, and you think you're doing it wrong, and you think that, well, this doesn't lead to anything, or what am I doing, or this is a waste of time, or there's a distraction, and that pulls you away. And the reality is recognizing that you're distracted and bringing your mind back to your focal point. That is meditation. Everyone that meditates, their minds go all over the place all the time. You are very lucky if you have a glimpse of quiet. The fact is, your mind is constantly racing all the time, topic to topic to topic to topic to topic. Nothing you can do about that. That's normal. That just makes you human. Welcome to the race. The object of meditation is really to understand and see that happening. And so when you're meditating, it happens to me every day. Like I cross my legs, I sit on my cushion, I stare at my wall, and then I hear a sound and I wonder what that sound is. And then I have to realize, I'm supposed to be focused. And so re-guide myself back to my meditation. And then my knee will begin to hurt, and I'll be wondering if I'm doing permanent damage to my knee. And so I'll go, oh, no, re-guide myself back to my meditation, focus on my breath, focus on my breath. And that is the process of meditation. And slowly, over years and decades, you slowly get to see, okay, there's a moment of peace and quiet between here. I see that a thought arises, it sticks a while in my head, and then it falls away and goes someplace else. I don't think about it anymore. And that's how your brain works, right? So the realization of that, noticing that your mind is constantly feeding little thought bubbles for you to pay attention to, and recognizing that you choose what you pay attention to, that is meditation. And so what I would do in your particular case, and by the way, I'm not a meditation instructor.
Sure.
I'm not qualified. I haven't taken any classes. Just from experience, is I would set a timer for 5 minutes, and I would sit down for 5 minutes, try to pay attention to my breath for 5 minutes. When the bell goes off, I'd stand up and walk away. If I'm distracted during that 5 minutes, I would try to bring myself back, realizing that probably the first 50 times you do it, you're going to be distracted and you're going to be stuck in that distraction. You're never going to bring yourself back. The bell goes off, stand up and walk away. Come back tomorrow, sit down again, try again. And eventually it comes around. How does this, your question, how does this affect finances? How does this affect your money? Well, there's two key things that mess people up in terms of getting to enough. The first is, before you invest at all, it's spending. I want this thing, I buy that thing. You don't create a buffer between the desire and the acquisition. And Amazon is the devil in this particular piece. I hope they don't advertise on your show. If I can just click a button and get a thing, then why wouldn't I click the button and get the thing? It's like I have to have a space between the want and the fulfillment of that want. And creating that space, it's a mindful thing. You have the thought, I want this thing. Wait, I don't really need that thing. That thing can come later. Let me think about it for a little while. I'll do this later, a week from now. And then maybe you don't need it anymore. Maybe it goes away.
Yeah, see, I love that advice because I've actually started doing the other thing. I'll buy 4 versions of the thing I want, then return the other 3. So I'm doing it completely backwards.
Multiplicative bad. Oh my God, that's terrible, man.
Yeah.
The second thing is in investing, where a thing happens in the markets and you respond, right? That's what we talked about earlier. 2020, world falls apart, fear, sell stuff, and now you're sitting in cash, 18 months later, and the market's up. What is it? A lot, 100%, over 100% from there. So it's how do you keep from reacting? When you know what you want and you have a plan to get it, then you follow the plan. You don't react to anything else. You just follow the plan. And it literally is that simple.
So no, I love you taking, oh, sorry, Mike. I love you taking that moment to sort of describe meditation, because I for a long time was sort of challenged or struggled with the same thing that Mike was saying, that sort of this, you hear everybody, like, all the celebrity types or whatever. Oh yeah. I meditate every day, blah, 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 And so, there must be something to it, but yeah, maybe I'm like Mike, maybe I was just insecure and had no idea that there was kind of, there's something to it, but at the same time, like there's nothing to it. It's easy. And I just found out just as recently as earlier this year, I went back to school this year to finish up a degree. And in the first semester, I needed a 1-credit course. So they put me in a mindfulness and meditation course. And my big takeaway, my big, reveal at the end of the term was that all I had to do was sit there and do exactly like you're saying. You just kind of let the things come in and let the things go out. And that's kind of it. Like, that's the whole thing. Like, there's nothing else to it. You don't need to drop $1,200 to the TM guys. You don't need to do any of this other stuff. Like, you just sit there. And then when it's annoying in your head, you just put up with it and let it go away.
That's right. Yeah. I had
nothing to it. So it's funny that the mystery or the grand reveal is that there's no real grand reveal. Right. You just need to take that minute and sit and think.
In my early struggles with meditation, I had a professor name of Stephen Goodman. Stephen Goodman said, "You know what, Jonathan, you're struggling with this. I get it. Here's what I want you to do: go home, set a timer for 5 minutes, sit in a chair, sit in a recliner, just go sit somewhere, and just don't get up for 5 minutes. Like, the goal, your attention objects isn't your breath. Your attention is not getting up." And I swear to God, for the first 2 weeks, I would get up 2 minutes in and go do something. Like, I couldn't focus on not moving my body. I couldn't just not move. And ultimately, you go, oh, just like you said, this is actually really easy. it's not hard to not move, but your brain says, oh, I got to go take care of this. I got to go do this. I got to go do that.
And it's funny how just like flexing that muscle and getting in the practice of not, allowing yourself time to do things. And I'm still really, really bad about this, but like, even when it comes down to just like hopping on my exercise bike at the end of the night, like for me to stop and do that, like I'm putting that ahead of work, I'm putting it ahead of watching TV, and putting it ahead of all this stuff. Right. And so for me to stop and just be calm and walk over to my bike and get on the bike and take the time to do that is still like impossible. I'm like the fidgety kid that couldn't sit in my chair for 5 minutes. Right. And so it's like, I need to be on, I need to be entertained, I need to be whatever. And so, so it is a challenge. And I think it's something you can work towards. I found, obviously there's a number of them, but I found there's an app called Waking Up that Sam Harris put together to be pretty effective for trying to keep sort of a semblance of a meditation going forward after this class. And I say, I'm good for about 1 day a week. I always put it on my to-do list as if I'm going to do it every day, just in case. And I think that counts for something. But the actual doing it part, I'm not coming around to as often as I'd like. But it's just it's an interesting thing anyway.
I don't know if. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say one of the. So since my brother died, my practice has completely fallen apart. Right. I can't. But the way I'm retaining the habit is, even if I can't meditate, I sit down on the cushion. I just sit down, and then I try. And if 20 seconds in, I can't focus, I can't quiet my mind, I stand back up and I walk away. And so it's just, you can create a habit by just doing the first part of the habit. I just sit down, and I know that eventually that 20 seconds will be 30 again, and I'll quickly go to a minute, and quickly go to 5 minutes, and quickly get back to 10. And so it's having some semblance of a habit. Tie it to a habit. You brush your teeth every morning, meditate right after you brush your teeth, and just sit for 30 seconds. That's the teachers that have been the most helpful to me have taught me how to tie it to other habits and how to maintain it as a habit. Because it's really just, it's a habit. You do it. And then now if I miss it, you miss it. Your brain goes crazy throughout the day. So it becomes something it's a huge benefit to the day, but tied to your habits. Those habits are important.
So I know this isn't really your topic. Meditation is not why you came on the show to talk about it, but are you supposed to be meditating for a purpose? Are you supposed to be thinking of, hey, I've got this problem, I'm thinking about fixing this problem, I'm going to sit and think about this problem for 5 minutes? Because I'll landscaping, right? I put earplugs in and I work for 3-4 hours with nothing but my thoughts going on in my head. And I consider that kind of my meditation sometimes. Or I'll be listening to an audiobook driving to Seattle or to a gig or whatever. And the last 4 chapters of the book, I don't remember because I'm lost in thought. Is that meditation? Or are you trying to just clear your brain of all the thoughts and kind of just get a fresh start? Can you maybe break that down or define that for me?
So, I mean, it's a really interesting question, because, and as a practicing Buddhist meditator, it bothers me when people say, yeah, I play soccer, I get in the zone, that's meditation. Like, no, that's not meditation. What it is it's distraction.
Okay.
Like you're losing yourself in thought. That's the opposite of meditation. And so meditation has to have intent, right? It has to have, and that I say that's Buddhist meditation. A Buddhist intent is to get off the wheel of samsara, the wheel of suffering, become enlightened. That's if you ask most Buddhists, they can actually pull that out and say this is the goal. That being said, meditation is very secularized in the US. And there are lots of people that use meditation as a hack to improve their lives. And does it work? Sure, works. I mean, meditation is a very powerful thing. Has a lot to do with brain chemistry and psychology and how things work in the brain. You can develop focus, you can develop all kinds of things. So meditation for me is, I'm trying to understand how my brain functions, see how it works, and create workarounds. And I have taken the Bodhisattva vow, which means I will try to help other people become enlightened, and I'll be the last one through the door of enlightenment. Like that's the bodhisattva vow. The vow is, I will wait until everyone else has escaped the wheel of samsara, and I'll close the door on my way out. And there's a lot of people that have taken that vow that are Buddhists and practice to a different extent. But meditation is really trying to non-judgmentally focus on the present moment and really focus and see what's going on, what's coming up for you now. Oh, that's anger. Oh, just noting that this is what's going on. This is what's happening, not attaching to it, not judging it, not pushing it away, not, engaging it deeper, noting it. Oh, this is anger. Oh, this is sadness. Oh, this is fear, and doing nothing about it, just noting. That's what I think meditation is. And then there's obviously developments beyond that. And 25 years later, I'm not an advanced practitioner. I'm a practitioner. Like I'm lucky to get glimpses of calm. Like that's
right.
Well, okay. Well, so let's take that and let's transition it back into a little bit of financial talk, and just sort of, because I think what we're kind of describing here, I mean, despite going long form on meditation, I think what we're talking about really is kind of a mindset shift in the investor. So, I mean, for your run of the mill investor, like we talked about at the top, this idea buy low, sell high, it's this concept of being kind of hyper aggressive, right? You're going in, you're making changes, and being very reactive. And I think the mindset shift you're talking about is this idea of whether it's meditation or not, or sort of, back to my stereotypical Buddhist, this idea of the person is calm and measured and, sort of thinks first before they react. And so stereotype or not, I think that sort of is exactly what we're describing as it pertains to investment advice and that sort of thing. So in Mindful Money, it seems that what you're trying to do, and I'll screw up your tagline, but it was something about, paying happiness dividends instead of just, paying out dividends. And I think that's a really interesting idea, because, you are really trying to focus your energy on trying to, create happiness, not necessarily wealth, but, if the two can cohabitate, then nothing wrong with that either. But I wonder then, so if that's the case, can we talk a little bit about just like where one might begin? So let's say, Mike sort of mentioned earlier, a lot of us, and myself included, sort of are, living the dream or chasing down passions and haven't really taken the time to appropriately invest, or we didn't start investing at 9, like some people in the room. And so, now we're trying to play a little catch up. We're trying to get back going. And, maybe, we're not rolling in dough or whatever, so where do we begin? And you mentioned earlier checking spending, but where do we go from there?
So I think everything, I often say that there are levers you can pull that will provide long-term benefits, and you want to pull on those levers. And there's other levers that you can try to pull that will do nothing for you because they don't lead to anything predictable or consistent. So what are the levers you can pull to provide a long-term financial benefit? There are things like saving more. That is, I think, the iron wire. That is the most important thing you can do, or anyone can do. If they're not starting with money, the most important thing they can do is save it and get it on the side. Once you've got that, then consistently increasing the amount that you're saving. So the first two pillars, the first two things you can do are save and then save more. And I think that those... Go ahead.
Are there any proper techniques for saving? Because I've heard that you can put your money in a savings account, and if it's just sitting in a savings account, it's not working for you. Is there a better way to do it other than to just put it in a shoebox and have it for later?
So at this point, there isn't a better way to do it. At this point, we're talking about the very basics. At this point, you just want to make sure you're doing it. Right. And then you want to develop past that. So in the very beginning, we just want to get the habit of saving. And when you have the habit of saving, then you start layering on the next things. The next thing is you have a habit of saving. You have the habit of, when you get a little bit more money, you save a higher percentage of that more than you did in the past. So you are saving more. Then we can start talking about investing. And then it's consistent investing. And our world is not helpful in this. There is so much noise out there about how to, and the headlines are filled with, SPACs and Bitcoin and, NFTs and all of these things that are neat. They take tons of airtime, but they are not investing. They are speculating. And so 90% of us, when we begin investing, we're actually speculating and confusing that as investing. So once you have consistent increasing savings, you build consistent investing. So what is that? What are the structures involved to make consistent investing work? I call it, there's three things, and there's only three things. It's plan appropriate asset allocation, broad diversification, and rebalancing. That's it. There isn't any portfolio miracle. Anything that somebody over here on my right says that might work the next 6 months, someone over here on my left will say it won't work the next 6 months. There's always people that argue about what's going to be the best thing. No one has a freaking clue. So the best thing you can do is asset allocate. What does that mean? You want to have some stocks. And I say mostly stocks, mostly slivers of businesses, US, global, big, small, slivers of businesses. Then you want to broadly diversify. You want to have lots of different slivers of lots of different businesses. And we build portfolios. The thing we talk about, the thing that most people recognize is like the Vanguard, international or all country, all index equity fund. So simple, cheap. You don't need anything expensive. Don't need anything that predicts markets. And then you want to have some fixed income, some ballast, some bonds that's safe. So say 80% equities, 20% fixed income. Personally, I like to have some cash and 100% equities. I love equities. I love stock. I don't mind volatility. I understand how it works. So I'm that way all the time. And then the third thing is rebalancing. When that 60 or 80% goes up substantially, take some off the table, put it in the cash, put it in the bonds, right? So rebalance. If your target allocation is 80% equities, 20% bonds, and now you're at 90% equities and 10% bonds, transition 10% of that over. I see some confusion.
No, my confusion was my teenage son busting in on me talking here. But trying to be, quiet about it.
Yeah.
So I like that, the way you kind of defined it. And actually, I've read the Rich Dad, Poor Dad books back in the day. I've done all the real estate kind of stuff because that's what I thought I wanted to get into earlier. And he actually did. I think he defines an asset as something that makes money versus you're just, he calls it assets or doodads, I think. And my justification as a kid was I bought that speaker and I'm making money with it. And really, I don't think that's the right approach. Yes, I'm making money with it, but really, don't you want your assets really working for you and me not carrying the speaker to the gig to make the money? Is that, I don't know. Finance is one of those things that I really am not good at, just because I've never even bought anything in the stocks. I've never invested in anything. I've never had healthcare. I'm a DJ. I play music. And so I really love having guests like you on to kind of go over stuff like this for people like me. There's a million of me out there. Mm-hmm. There's tons of people like me out there that have no clue where to put the money into stocks, bonds, Bitcoin, this or that. I know Ryan's done a lot with Bitcoin and NFTs lately, and I've never pulled the trigger because I know that if I pull the trigger, not knowing what I'm doing, I'm just going to be burning my money and throwing it away. And so do you really, if you're going into this and trying to get started in investing and buying stocks and bonds and this and that, is the best approach to go to someone like you and say, hey, here's 10 grand. Can you do it for me? Is that, I mean, obviously you want to know what you're doing and what you're buying, but as someone who's never done it before, I'm so hesitant to pull the trigger.
Yeah, there's no question that it's a catch-22. I think that most people that do what I do, I would be worried if you were going to go to someone like me and say, here's $10,000, please manage it for me. I would be worried about what they would put you in, because probably it's going to be a high commission item. probably it's not going to be the best thing for you, and probably you're never going to hear from them again.
Yeah.
Right. You're not going to get comprehensive financial planning and long-term investment support with 10 grand. And that's unfortunately the reality that we have. However, 10 years ago, you didn't have other choices. Now you have other choices. There's a ton of stuff. Vanguard, Fidelity, Betterment, Wealthfront. There's lots of places that will help you build a broadly diversified portfolio. The thing that's missing is somebody to help you keep from making the big mistake. Because if you use Betterment or you use Vanguard and you're on your own when the pandemic hits. Now, I can tell you right now that when the pandemic hits or when the next catastrophe hits, don't change a thing. And you might remember that when the next thing happens. And you might remember Jonathan said, don't change a thing, just stick to it. Maybe continue contributing as we talked about. But most people forget that information is there. They see that their portfolio is down 20, 30%. They worry, they get nervous, they panic, they sell. And we see this in fund flows, like the way mutual funds are traded, the way ETFs are traded. We know when people are putting money in, we know when people are taking money out. And so you can see the response to things. So nobody needs what I do. They choose to work with me because of all the stuff that we do for somebody, and they want to go do something else. What I do is not rocket science. I use a software program to do financial planning. I don't do the financial planning myself. I know a lot of the rules. I know how to use the software program, but it is software. Right? There's a spreadsheet involved. Like it's not rocket science.
Well, I think one of the things, a real benefit of a financial advisor. So I actually have a good story and a bad story that leads to a question, kind of. So I'll see if I can make this sort of succinct. So anyway, I had a account about 10 years ago, back before there was all these options, that was a rollover of an old IRA. I've only worked for people in my adult life for, I don't know, a collective 5 or 6 years. And so I have a very small 401k that I had developed over 3 years working in an agency. And they rolled it over into some account, and it sat at Fidelity for a while. And then eventually I rolled it over because I had a friend who was a financial advisor for one of the big name firms. And so I said, hey, I need to roll this thing out of Fidelity. They're going to close my account, whatever. We need to roll it into something permanent, so can you put it into, whatever you do, right? So he rolls it into some kinds of IRA, some sort of IRA. And it's about $10,000. He puts this IRA, and but what he bought were some kind of bonds, Schwab something bonds, right? And that account sits. 10 years later, I mean, literally last year, mid-COVID, just like so many other people, I took an interest in finance, and I started looking at things, and I started getting interested. And so I started looking at what money I had, which wasn't a lot, but I started looking around, right? And I came across this account again, and I saw that literally it was about $10,003 over the course of 10 years sitting in this IRA in bonds that were worth absolutely the same thing today as they were then. And, and I was talking to my wife's father, who is a former financial advisor, about this. And he was like, oh my God. He's like, with that $10,000 over 10 years, like, I mean, you could have doubled or tripled or better, just given what the stock market's done in the last 10 years. Even if you were just in a very conservative mutual fund or something, like it could have, almost anything would have been better.
Yep.
And so now I'm in this spot, like you were saying, high cost, high everything, because it's one of the big dogs. They want money for everything, right? So I sold all the bonds at a fee. So now I'm actually in the rears on what I had invested in the first place. And then I rebought, I think it was VOO and VTI or something like that. A couple of these, broad market funds. And, and just in the last year since I've done that, it's up a few $100 or whatever it is. And it's now it's doing something. But my thought is I've got some other money that I've set aside in another company, one of these online companies called M1 Finance. And I've got just some money in there that basically I'm using kind of as a holding place for some, like a deposit on a client job. And I just needed somewhere to put it where it might grow a little bit in the short term. And so I put it in there, but then I got thinking maybe I need to combine these things, and I want to, get more money in a singular account so that maybe it'll start compounding or something faster, or, with more principal in there. And so, but now, and this is where the pickle is, and maybe this is where the value of a good financial advisor comes in, is I don't know what to do or how to do that. So, with this M1 Finance, they give me a form for rolling over an IRA or whatever. But what I have with them otherwise is just kind of a traditional brokerage account. So like if I move everything over, am I losing tax benefits? Am I, what I'm afraid of, and actually earlier when you said the big problem was that everybody pulled their money, the big problem that hopped into my head is making a mistake, as you're reaching retirement age, in moving an account or something and then breaking it. Right. So now all of a sudden you have all this tax, that you have to pay or whatever. And so I wonder, if you're trying to consolidate funds and things like that, I mean, is that where a good financial planner can come into play, is to solve those types of problems and look out for tax implication versus just, I mean, it's easy to throw the money in, to whoever brokerage account, whatever brokerage.com you want to use. But I think that for me anyway, the bigger problems have been maybe on the back end, how do we advantage things for taxes, and how do we, move money around without taking hits and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think you nail it. I mean, the advantage of the financial planner or the advisor isn't, selecting better investments. It's not market timing. It's helping you think through the plan, and then helping you answer the questions that come along the way, that come randomly. Next year it'll be one thing. The year after that there'll be a change in tax policy. Year after that there'll be something else, and then you'll leave one job, and do you roll it over? Or do you leave your 401k? There's always these questions that crop up. And depending on, and unfortunately the reality is, depending on the size of the assets that you have or have access to, that will largely determine the kind of advice you can get. So if you've got $10,000, $12,000, this is what I was talking about earlier. If you had $10,000, $12,000 and you went to somebody and said, hey, I'm thinking about consolidating this, or I'd like to invest this, can you help me? You're not going to get the greatest advice. It's likely you're going to talk to a bank broker. You're not going to talk to a fiduciary, because fiduciaries, won't look at it unless there's an hourly fee or a retainer fee, or a sizable chunk of assets that they can receive an assets under management fee on. So you're not going to probably get a fiduciary, you get a broker. Whenever you get a broker, that broker is going to sell the product that they sell. They're going to, if they're mutual fund dealers and they like American funds, you're going to get American funds. Are those the best funds? No, they're the funds that guy uses, right? So that's the problem, is if you have a little bit, it's very difficult to get really good advice. Now, that being said, we talked generationally before about the changes in live work balance, or seeking wealth versus seeking that good life. We're seeing a lot of changes in financial services. We're trying to solve this in my company as well, but I'm seeing a lot of companies do things like a subscription service for $100 or $200 a month. They will work with anybody, and they'll do their planning and answer their questions. And in our office, we're thinking about how do we provide some kind of a monthly conversation that's just answers to questions like those. I'm thinking it's not subscription. I'm thinking it's just something we do every month. And then we have our digital advisor. We've got a partnership with Betterment that we loaded our portfolios onto a Betterment platform. And so we can give people access to that platform and then invite them to this once a month Q&A conversation. Hey, Jonathan, just want to real quick, just like you said, I have this IRA, I have this 401k. Do I roll it over? If I roll it over, what are the tax consequences? What's the best way to roll it over? Can I roll it over and combine this with 2 other IRAs? What do I do here to protect myself and make sure I'm doing the right thing? Okay, real easy. Answer the question right there. Do this, look for this form, do this with Fidelity, boom, 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 done. But that's not an in-depth relationship thing. I don't know everything about your finances. I'm just answering a very specific question that you have. And I think we can actually say someone that's got, $5 million in invested assets, and they run a business and they have 7 pieces of real estate and they're donating money to their alma mater, they have a more complex financial life. They need more guidance. They have more questions. Somebody that has $10,000, they're rolling out of a 401k into an IRA. Not that there's no value in that. That is everything to that person, but it's a simpler question. So how do we get simple answers to people that have simple questions and help them make that decision without hurting themselves and without making that big mistake? The industry is trying to figure it out so that we can do it in a fiduciary way, really putting the interests of that investor first instead of the way we've always done it, which is, you know what, buy this fund, give me a 7% commission and good luck to you. Because that's how we've done it in the past. And that's unfortunate, but it's changing. So there's people out there, subscription services, again, Betterment, Wealthfront, you're not going to get advice from them, not going to get answers to questions, but there's people out there that'll do it hourly. There's ways to get answers. And frankly, we've got Google. Google, don't just take the first thing that shows up, right? Read 7 or 8 of them, figure out, on balance what they're saying. And you can get a lot of information that way. There's a ton of books, ton of reading lists. The information is out there. There's nothing that I have access to that you don't have access to. I've just been doing it for 25 years. It's easier for me to find if I don't know the answer.
Right. Yeah. No, it almost seems like it ought to be something. And I'll put a trademark on this just in case somebody's not doing it and it's a great idea. But, it seems almost like because of the effect that, financial literacy and sort of, the amount of stress people endure when money isn't going well, like it almost seems that it should be like not necessarily covered by insurance, but like you could almost have something like that, right? Where you have sort of a plan with a company where basically you have access to these kind of people. And just like you do teledoc or whatever, you could do sort of a telecall with whoever your financial planner is or something. But it's almost like an insurance policy, right? You do this preventative stuff so that you don't have the big mistake down the road, that kind of thing. And it seems like there might be something interesting around sort of equating healthcare and, financial care, all as that pertains to happiness, health, wealth, and happiness.
Well, more and more that's available. So that's one of the things that we do. We have, I have the free course I mentioned earlier. We have a suite of 18 courses that are, people can step up and buy a course or buy whatever they want on the website. We actually offer that to businesses. And so when we offer that to the businesses, we actually do like a cohort thing where we invite their employees to go through and we'll answer the employees' questions as well as they're going through these courses. And they're just digital courses, online, available to anyone, anywhere. But then when a company hires us or buys the courses for their employees, we try to offer that exactly what you're talking about. It's kind of insurance is probably not the right word, but it's something like that where they have access, they can get answers to questions when they have them, and we're there to support because they don't have that support anywhere else.
Yeah, I'm even thinking of like a model around like, they're doing a lot of, phone-based or app-based like therapy these days and that kind of stuff, right? So it's all, if you could just kind of, anytime you're feeling a financial burden or whatever, you could just log into this app or something and talk to somebody who could walk you through a problem, even if it is a fee or whatever. I mean, I think it would be totally worth it. But I think treating it, or I guess giving finance and giving money sort of the reverence that you do, healthcare or mental well-being, it seems like it's sort of a parallel, it sort of runs along with those two items. So it seems like treating it differently rather than, money is some sort of just an object that we have or whatever, but rather it plays a critical role in this sort of trifecta of, your health and your sanity and your finance, financial well-being. It seems like those 3 things almost could live under one umbrella.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of businesses are doing that. A lot of companies are offering that plan. It includes finance, it includes mental health, it includes healthcare. And that's out there. It's less because it's not, there aren't many vendors competing to offer it as a service. So it's difficult for companies to know, okay, this is a vetted program. So anyone can go to Khan Academy. I don't know if you've seen this, but there's a company that was launched, I think a couple of weeks ago. I think it's FL4U, Financial Literacy for You. And they actually highlight a lot of Khan Academy videos. They're boring as heck. But they're good information. And that's how do we help people digest the information? Because it's not as if this stuff's not out there. It's everywhere out there. There's federal programs. There's online courses that are for free. There's just tons of information out there, but people don't digest it. People don't go for it. And then when they have a problem, they have a question, they don't really know who to trust when they ask. And it's a fundamental problem with how we financialized everything. Money is so important and everyone's sort of looking out for themselves financially. And how do I trust what this person is saying? And financial services industry has kind of done that to itself. We've done a lot of harm with commissions and crappy products and making promises that we can't deliver on. So now it's, the comeuppance is the public, the younger public, doesn't necessarily trust the brokers in the financial services world. The one way around that, I think, is to make sure when you're talking to somebody, anyone that's listening to this is make sure they're a fiduciary, make sure they're not a broker, make sure they have a fiduciary responsibility to put your interests first. And if you ask that question, they have to be honest about it. Will they be? I don't know. But if you sue them after the fact and you can say, hey, he told me he was a fiduciary, turns out he's not, well, that means he's going to lose that lawsuit.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
I think we're starting to get to the end here. I mean, unfortunately, I have 100 more questions I could ask, but we spend a lot of time on other things, but I think they're equally important. So I think it's great. As we're sort of drawing to an end here, do you want to just sort of quickly, give a little plug for your business where people can go learn more? Obviously, you can provide us, at a later time, some links and things like that to coursework and that kind of stuff. But if you'd like to sort of mention where people can go to learn more.
Yeah, you actually started a podcast, didn't you? You were just telling me about that beforehand. I think you're 10 episodes in, and the guests that you were telling me about sound really interesting, and I'm excited to go and listen to it. So tell us where we can find that, and if they want to download some of your training manuals and stuff, where they can find that as well.
So the best place to go, where most everything is mindful.money. That's our website. You can find all our social media there. The courses are there. The personal services are there. Everything is there. You can also follow me on social media. The podcast is a different website. It's mindfulwealthpodcast.com. And I think it's a pretty interesting program. By all means, go listen, subscribe. We're very young, so we need all the help we can get at this point. Much appreciated. I think the book, go to the website, connect with me on social media. I think that's the best thing to do.
Okay. Great. So, and just one more little plug, if you don't mind, can you tell us your son's band's name or his group's name? I mean, me and Mike have been in the music industry a million years. Not that we can move him more records, but I think out of curiosity, we'd both like to listen to it.
Yeah, he's Eli, E-L-I, and then my last name, D-E-Y-O-E, and he's on Spotify as Eli DeYoe. That's it.
Nice.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll have to check
him
him out. Well, yeah, no, thanks so much for this, Jonathan. I mean, I just echo what Mike said earlier about how much we really value having people come on and talk about financial stuff. Both Mike and I have a long storied career of being freelance and contract and all this stuff. And, especially in our younger years, neither of us are particularly financially smart. So we bought lots of cool stuff. We did lots of cool things, but finance has always been one of those things that sort of eluded us. So we really appreciate people like you.
I think the important thing to realize, by the way, I really appreciate being on the show as well, Mike and Ryan. But the important thing to realize is it's a long road. I was telling Mike before we got on that I've been in the financial services world working with money for 25 years. And it was only like 5, maybe 7 years ago where I started feeling like I was financially in a good place. So it takes a long time, even if you know what you're doing, to get there. So patience, one foot in front of the other, goes a long ways to getting there.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Those are great parting shots. So thanks to everybody who tunes in this week, every week. Be sure to check out Jonathan and all his stuff, Eli's band also. And we'll catch you all next time.